Morning everyone, my name is Xinyi Wu and I'm here to talk to you about how to spend $35 billion in the right way. First, I want to say a huge thank you to everybody in our team, especially our manager Jia Wang, deputy manager Mariana Fajardo, and our faculty advisor Professor Sarah Johnson. Here are two quick facts about the US. By the year 2018, US is the second largest emitter of greenhouse gas by total and per capita in the world. 15% of the global greenhouse gas is emitted by the US. At the same time, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change set a global goal of reducing greenhouse gas emission by 40 to 60% in the year 2030 compared to the level of 2010. It also set a goal of making net zero emission of greenhouse gas in the year 2055. Even though the US withdrew from the Paris Agreement, it could do a lot and actually should do a lot. So, one of the solutions is the bill that is proposed in the past year, 2019, which is the National Climate Bank Act. It proposes that the federal government should provide $35 billion towards National Climate Bank so that this bank could invest in clean technologies and thus reduce national greenhouse gas emission. So now you might ask, what exactly is a climate bank? Even though it is called climate bank, it's actually not a real bank. It is a non-profit and at the same time a financial institute that uses innovative financing techniques and market development tools, usually in partnership with the private sector, to accelerate financial investment on clean technologies. This explains why it is supposed to accept public funds rather than private funds. There are quite a few successful climate bank models in the UK, Australia, and Japan. However, in the US, there are only climate banks on state level, for example, in the state of New York and Connecticut. As for the concept of a national level climate bank, it is a completely new thing. And this is probably why it is necessary for it to get some extra help. So, here comes our client, the Coalition for Green Capital, which is a non-profit organization with a mission to drive greater clean energy investment into existing and new markets. As you might already have noticed, this is completely in line with the intention of the National Climate Bank Act. And this explains why the Coalition for Green Capital runs a national climate campaign, and it hires us, CPESP students, as its graduate consultants. And here is the question that CGC wants us to answer. How should the National Climate Bank invest in offshore wind and industrial decarbonization? So, in order to answer these questions, we break things down into three perspectives. The first is science, the second is policy, and the third is finance. We are interested to know what is the emission reduction efficiency of this technology and whether it's feasible for it to go into large-scale operation. As for policy, we did some research regarding the current political environment and the actual implementation of the legislation versus what is written in the law. As for the financial sector, we did some research about current financing situation and made some prediction about future investment trend. So how exactly did we do the research? The answer is we did a lot of literature review, including government reports and reports conducted by large consulting firms such as McKinsey and Deloitte. On top of that, we talked to plenty of experts in all three sectors so that we could have a very comprehensive understanding of this whole issue. Here, I want to stress that we are analyzing the possibility and the necessity of whether we should invest in these two technologies. And if we do, what strategies should we use? We are not making assessment of these two technologies itself. So, here are some preliminary results that we got from the past few weeks of research. First, for offshore wind, here are some advantages. At least, in the very mature European market, fixed bottom offshore wind turbines are really mature, and it could be something that could be applied to the US market. And according to the Department of energy in the US, the US has really abundant natural resources for further development of offshore wind. It is estimated that the technical capacity of offshore wind exceeds 2,000 gigawatt. This doubles the size of the nation's current electricity use. And based on this fact, the DOE has provided really a lot of funding support to further develop this sector. Millions of dollars have been put into research programs conducted by institutions. However, as good as everything might sound, there are also plenty of disadvantages that we should take into concern. The first is uncertainty around environmental assessment process. A really good example is the Vineyard Wind Farm, which is planned to be located in Massachusetts. The environmental assessment for this wind farm was supposed to come to an end in the end of 2019. However, it's actually still going under the process. This means the company could bear a really high opportunity cost. And even without this opportunity cost, the initial cost of wind farm on commercial scale is already high enough. Still taking Vineyard as an example, it has a capacity of 800 megawatt. And guess what is the initial cost for that? It has a budget of over $2 billion, and that could be a really huge barrier to small investors. After offshore wind, let's talk about industrial decarbonization. We did research on the following techniques, and out of these 5, we see carbon capture, utilization, storage, and biomass as the most potential. The other 3 are also really interesting and fun to talk about. However, due to the time limitation, I would not be able to give more details. So we would put more focus on these 2 highlighted techniques. For the carbon capture, utilization, and storage, it means the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere would be captured and then pumped into lower ground or deep under ocean. It would have the chance to be reutilized as industrial materials. As for biomass, it usually refers to woody, cellulosic, and vegetable fat. It could be either directly used for heating or used to generate electricity. And here is the analysis results that we got in the past few weeks. For biomass, the advantages are really clear. The technology is simple and mature, and these crops and plants could be regrown on a yearly basis. However, there are also some concerns that investors might have regarding this technique. One thing is some people see the biomass technique as not clean enough because it could still generate carbon emission into the air, and they feel that this is not a technique good enough to reduce the greenhouse gas emission conducted by this country. However, this disadvantage could be completely resolved by the CCUS technique, because the carbon released by the combustion of biomass could be captured by this technique, and the carbon captured could be restored and reused. CCUS is a relatively mature technique in the US. There are 10 existing large-scale operators in the US. And the DOE has also provided plenty of support. It has already provided billions of US dollars for the research programs, and the cost is expected to drop significantly in the coming decade. However, it's still very important to notice this technique's disadvantages, which is the project cost could be very high, and whether the project is profitable or not really is subject to the carbon price of the market. So that is what we have done in the past few weeks. In the coming few weeks, we would identify investment potential and the financial tools we might use to develop these 2 sectors. And we would also set expected outcome. And for more details, please see our final report and final briefing, which would come in the end of April. That is all from me today, and I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you for your attention.
Well, thank you for your attention and listening to these wonderful briefings. You now have a pretty good picture of what our students in the Environmental Science and Policy program are working on here in this program that's a partnership between SEPA and the Earth Institute. In about a month or so, we'll be toward the end of these projects, and we'll have the final briefings. And I think that will also be time to really see the conclusions and the results of these studies. So I want to congratulate the students on their excellent briefings, and I'm looking forward to the final briefings that will take place later this semester.